Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today with your testimony. Housing affordability is something that I'm hearing about a lot from my constituents in Ohio's 2nd District. And broadly speaking, low and middle income Americans are often hit the hardest by housing costs, regardless of whether that's for home ownership or renters themselves. And these costs place strains on household budgets, they limit enhanced educational opportunities, impair workforce mobility, slow job creation, and increase financial risks across the board. Unfortunately, these days we're living through a period of record inflation, skyrocketing costs, supply chain challenges, rising interest rates, all of which make homeownership increasingly out of reach for many, many more Americans, unfortunately. And this also affects renters who have seen rent payments rise tremendously over the last year and a half. The cost of living for all Americans is going up across the board, and the policies we're seeing from many and from this administration are directly contributing to rising economic hardships. Facts are stubborn things, or at least in America they used to be. Sadly and factually, under one-party control in Washington, inflation has reached a 40-year high. Interest rates are rising, and the economic uncertainty caused by their efforts to raise taxes on small businesses have placed tremendous strain on hardworking Americans. And so like many of my colleagues, I'm hearing about this from constituents back home, including in the housing affordability space. On the supply side, I've heard from developers who've had to walk away from multiple housing projects in Cincinnati and elsewhere in Ohio due to increasing contractor and material costs. In fact, one house builder reports that they've had to start including escalation clauses in their contracts for the majority of their suppliers due to the volatility of the market and the uncertainties of today's economy. In Cincinnati, we're seeing a 27% decline in single-family permits from last year in response to mortgage rates rising. Residential construction material costs are up 40.4%. And there are more than 2,000 open construction jobs needing to be filled in greater Cincinnati area alone. So the policies that have been enacted from the American Rescue Plan Act have not made life more affordable. In fact, the results have proven to be to the contrary. Although the pandemic had many negative effects on our society, on our economy, I will say that bad policy after a pandemic can't be blamed on the pandemic. It's bad policy, policies that have been proven to fail throughout our history. Across industry, across income levels, across the country, Americans are getting crushed by the economy that has unfolded. So, and what we're seeing to me is under the guise of compassion, these policies fail us, especially the most needy. Back home, the message I receive from my constituents is not to raise taxes. That's the last thing they want. You know, this inflation is a crippling tax on people. So especially on Americans that are most needy. And what they want is a long-term tax and economic certainty that families and businesses can plan for the future. So we need to look at policies that we've enacted that have been proven to work for Americans. And we need to also be honest with ourselves and look at policies that have not. We need to build on policies that promote pro-growth, such as Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which it did, and laid the foundation for competitive wages, record low unemployment, steady economic growth. Policies that don't put the federal government in the position of picking winners and losers, but rather provides opportunities for all Americans. In my district, I have both major metropolitan area, Cincinnati, and rural areas that stretch into Appalachia. And while I believe state and local governments are better positioned for addressing the unique needs of their communities, I think Congress can pursue policies that can be helpful and give them tools that they need. Mr. Pinto, when looking at the housing affordability crisis we have today, what trends do you see in urban areas like Cincinnati compared to rural areas like Appalachia, and how can the federal government better address the crisis across that region?
Thank you for that question. I keep coming back to we need more supply. We don't need more stimulus, because if you have inadequate supply, that immediately gets capitalized into higher prices. So we need more supply. And the solution for that is we have to rely on state and local governments to add to that supply. We've been looking at places like Cincinnati and rural areas and trying to come up with suggestions. I've been meeting with representatives of Austin and Spokane and Little Rock and a dozen other places about how they can use the research that we've been doing on light touch density to increase their supply, and I'd be happy to do the same for the Cincinnati area.
I appreciate that. I go
Thank
back.
you. Gentleman's time is